I've kept saying recently on videos that in the end, people reveal themselves. This is a deep belief, not just of my view of the way the world is, but also a Jewish philosophical view. It's actually quite related to one of the next festivals coming up, Purim, where much as Haman, the evil character in the story, tries to kill the Jews, in the end, all he does is sow the seeds of his own downfall. Evil always exposes itself, always destroys itself in the end. And we and other pro-Israel and pro-Jewish, pro-Western, pro-American commentators have been raising the red flag when it comes to commentators like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and others, and of course people on the far left, woke, progressive side, about the just deeply flawed, morally flawed, intellectually flawed viewpoints, and that they're coming from, it seems, often sinister, dark places, even potentially sometimes bad faith places. And this is becoming clearer and clearer in ways that might surprise you. And this always happens in the end. But it's happening here in the case of Venezuela, because the reaction to Venezuela, Trump capturing Maduro, the evil authoritarian leader, and seeking to strengthen the American dominance in the Western Hemisphere, is so clearly, in my mind, in the mind of so many Venezuelans, a good thing for the world. In the eyes of those who seek to topple their own authoritarian regimes across the world. And for those who say, well, doesn't this just do away with international law? Doesn't it embolden China and Russia to do the same? First of all, no, it doesn't. It makes them fear America even more. Secondly, it's not clear to me this goes against international law. He was had an indictment. Maduro had an indictment for narco-terrorism. But one of the problems also is we've made international law the final say on morality here. And for those who say, well, what about Russia and China feeling, well, they could do the same if you throw out international law? Well, there's a difference. The difference is America's dominance as a superpower in the world is morally a better system. They have a society that's based on a much more correct morality, based on biblical morality. I'm not saying it's perfect at all. In some ways, America's become disconnected from that. But compared to Russia, compared to the Communist Party leading China, yes, it is. And it is better for America to have dominance in the world in order to protect those values and protect those principles than for Russia and China. The difference is, they are not the same countries with the same values. This is about values here. And so people can't see that. Well, I think we've, again, gone back to flawed morality, and we're seeing that in the case of Tucker Carlson, who says that, well, I quite like the fact that Maduro has... what did he say? He said, I like the fact that Maduro has a socially conservative regime. He's banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned sex changes, banned usury, banned pornography. And so, therefore, why are you caricaturing him this way? And without going into the details, this is obviously such a ridiculous, bizarre argument. Surely one has to prioritize the fact that people are starving and dying in Venezuela, that he is an evil, authoritarian, corrupt ruler, managing drug cartels, suppressing his own people and their own freedoms. There might be elements of social conservatism you like. Many social conservatives in America would say we want to encourage these things more at a grassroots level and a cultural level, for a start. But anyway, not being able to see the wood for the trees here in terms of priorities. The fact that he is starving his own people. The fact that his people are so oppressed. He doesn't seem to be interested in that, and instead thinks that this is just an operation in order to bring gay marriage into Venezuela. Forget the moral rights and wrongs of his argument. It's clearly coming from a place of insane intellectual thinking. And Candace Owens did the exact same thing. This is what happens everywhere. Zionists cheer every regime change. It's the Zionists. There's never been a single regime change the Zionists are not applauded because it means they get to steal land, oil, and other resources. So the fact that she always, even in the case of Venezuela, has to bring this back to Israel, Zionists as the cause, unable to just zoom out and see what's actually going on, it's another case of people revealing themselves. As Konstantin Kisin wrote, I was going to make a joke about how these retards will claim Venezuela operation is Israel's fault, but they're actually legit claiming it's Israel's fault. Anti-Semitism is a real, it's a real mind virus, mind sickness. We've spoken in the past about where it comes from. and the Jewish view of how to solve it. Maybe I'll touch on that a bit at the end. But I hope it's becoming clearer and clearer to people. Zach Goldsmith, a member of the House of Lords, said 0.2% of people are Jewish. If you believe they have supernatural powers, control everything, and are engaged in a weird global but undefined and invisible conspiracy, then you can blame them for literally anything, and everything with absolute confidence. A whole herd of stupid people will agree it's much easier than trying to understand a complex world. Now, the reason they point to the Jews partly is because the Jews are an easy target for conspiracy theories, because the Jews have been scattered all over the world throughout most of their history, been intensely persecuted, been few in number, and yet the Jews have thrived, they've survived, while other nations and empires have come and gone, and they've dramatically impacted the world's conversation of ideas, particularly around monotheism, but also Jews as individuals. Like something like 25% of Nobel Prize winners are Jews, with 0.2% of the world's population. Extraordinary. So you can say, well, it's a conspiracy. But then the problem with that is, how do you explain all the persecution and suffering? Well, it's just, they're the bad Jews. It's just a few Jews at the top that punish the Jews so everyone can not focus on them. It just becomes ridiculous. It gets ridiculous. But the point is, you're then left with, well, either it's a fluke. If it's not a conspiracy, it's either a fluke, but then I think that becomes very challenging, especially when you look at how so much of this was foretold and prophesied, these phenomena in the Torah. Or you say there's divine destiny here. And that's what I point to. And that's what leads me to what's the cause of anti-Semitism. The Torah, Judaism, tells us that at root, it comes from a hostility to the Jewish people's divine mission, which is to bring the ideas of the Torah into the world, to be a light to the nations. The rabbis of the Talmud discuss legal matters, in Jewish law legal matters, in pages and pages of detail. But when it came to anti-Semitism, as Dennis Prager said, they could summarize it in a sentence. Sina comes from Sinai. Sina means hatred. It's a play on words. Sina means hatred in Hebrew, and they're saying hatred of the nations comes from Sinai. Mount Sinai, the moment when the Jews were chosen for that mission. And anti-Semitism is a resentment, hostility, maybe a jealousy of the Jewish people's divine chosenness in their mission to do this job. And it can be all those negative feelings that come from God choosing one over the other. In fact, this goes back to the very beginning story of Cain and Abel. God chooses Abel's offering over Cain, and Cain can't handle it. Instead of saying, okay, how can I learn from this? How can I, we move forward together? Instead, he chooses jealousy, hostility, and resentment, and he kills him. This is a tale as old as time. And that is what anti-Semitism is. The solution to it, in some ways, when anti-Semites say the problem with the world is what the Jews have done, as Jews, with our particular divine mission, we actually say, yeah, you've got a point. But it's not what we've done, it's what we are still yet to do. It means we have still more work to do. So we shouldn't be blamed, but the idea in their head of pointing to the Jews, the way the UN obsessed with the Jews, looking for a solution to the world's ills from the Jews, is actually correct from Jewish thinking. It's just the blaming shouldn't be there, but the idea that they're going to be the ones where so much of this is resolved is true. As Hillel Neuer pointed out, the Islamic regime in Iran is cracking down against protesters over 8 days in 222 locations, 19 killed, 51 injured, 990 arrested. UN Human Rights Council reaction, 0 resolutions, 0 emergency sessions, 0 commissions of inquiry. And yet, when it comes to the Jewish people, well, they have more resolutions against Israel than every other country combined. It's absurd. It's morally, intellectually indefensible unless you understand what's really going on with anti-Semitism. There's much more to show you about all of this and what's really going on here. The meltdown we're seeing on people revealing themselves on the woke left and the woke right. Have a look at Dave Smith in conversation with Nick Fuentes, because this conversation, I would say, is deeply exposing for Dave Smith, who pretends to just be, I'm just concerned about Israel's moral behavior. As a Jew, the only one that talks about their Jewishness whenever it's to criticize Jews or Israel. But here, there's almost nothing about Israel's actions and Israel's doing. This is pure anti-Semitism that he seems to be indulging in with none other than Nick Fuentes. Have a watch.
And that just tells you about what Jewish identity really is and how it's political. And so to me, what matters more, I think it was exaggerated. I think it was embellished. To me, it's more about, like you said, I don't want this trauma imposed on me and for it to define our political order, because that's really the issue.
Well, that part I think is 100% reasonable. Mm-hmm. And it is very central to Jewish identity, and I think in unhealthy ways. And I think absolutely you're right about this being the story becomes this very ahistorical, weird version of it where it's like the creation of Israel stopped the Holocaust or something like that, which is like just not at all true. In fact, they had very similar goals, the Zionists and the Nazis at first, which is why the Zionists wanted to do business with them. I think it was the Nazis' anti-Semitism is the only reason why that didn't happen. I think even David Irving, I think he put it at between 4 and 5. Like, I really appreciated on Patrick Bet David when you said, like, look, I don't want them living here, but like that we also can't support killing them over there. And I just thought there was something really powerful about that.
I mean, where to start? You know, he's like legitimizing somebody Nick Fuentes' views, saying, "Oh, I don't want them living here, but like I don't want them to be killing them over here." And like, and I think that's legitimate. Like, that's how he's talking. It's unbelievable. He's legitimizing David Irving, a Holocaust denier, historian that was proven in court to be acting. Or to be giving false information, and this notion that the Nazis and the Zionists had much in common and were collaborating. You should know, according to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, accepted by many, many governments and organizations around the world, that is basically anti-Semitism. You're conflating Zionism with Nazism, and it is evil to be doing that. The Zionists, in a Havara agreement, were trying to save Jews, and the Nazis were just being politically expedient at the time. Had nothing to do with shared ideology. Obviously, they are the opposite ideology. Zionism is about giving life to the Jewish people in their ancient homeland. Nazism is about destroying the Jews. You should know that the Nazis had plans through working with SS operatives that went into Africa, as well as the Mufti, who was the spiritual leader of the Arabs in British Mandate of Palestine at the time. They had plans to do the final solution in Israel, then British Mandate Palestine. They wanted to kill the Jews there. To create these total inversions of reality is, in my mind, to be engaged in anti-Jewish rhetoric. The hostility to Israel, to Zionism, is the same hostility to the Jews of the Nazis. And it came in the Middle East from Arab Islamist hostility to Jews that predated the founding of Israel. They were trying to kill the Jews in that territory well before. And everything that Dave Smith laments about Israel is things Israel had to do in reaction to those who had the same genocidal desire to wipe out the Jews that the Nazis did in Germany. It's sick. It's utterly sick, the way that he views things and is revealing himself as not to be a good faith actor, but the fact that he's having these lovey-dovey conversations with Nick Fuentes, again, tells you all you need to know. We're seeing from Megyn Kelly, who it's becoming clear to me now is just trying to pander to what she thinks presumably is a growing part of the right-wing audience, the Groypers, where she's saying, always he tries to have a slightly more balanced view, but saying, I'm not just going to instantly jump into celebrating what Trump's done here with Maduro because of X, Y, and Z. I think at this point, it seems to me that this is because she thinks that's what the Candace and Tucker audiences want to hear. And she kind of sort of seems to be admitting that in a way by saying at the start here that she used to just say what Fox News told her to say, which is, I think, a little bit dubious to be giving strong moral opinions based on what you're told to say by your employer or whatever. But anyway, have a watch of this, because again, it's just another example of, I think, a bit of a moral vacuum, a collapsed moral compass here, where she'll give all these arguments about why it's wrong to, it might be very questionable to try and do all this regime change, and we don't know what it's going to actually achieve. But frankly, there's a very, very strong case to be made here morally, and she doesn't seem to want to indulge in much of that at all. She just wants to kind of say, look, It's not quite clear, but I'd like to focus on the negative.
I really think this is something we need to consider both sides on. I really do. I don't think, let me just tell you something. When I was at Fox News, which was a long time, 14 years, I would have known exactly what to do in the wake of Trump's attack in Venezuela, his retrieval, shall we say, to put it in mild terms, of Nicolas Maduro. I would have known that I was supposed to cheerlead it. And I turned on Fox News yesterday, and I'm sorry, but it was like watching Russian propaganda. There was nothing skeptical. It was all rah-rah, cheerleading. Yes, let's go. And that's fine. I love our military as much as anyone, and I believe in President Trump. But there are serious reasons to just exercise a note of caution before we just get on the rah-rah train. All right, I have done that enough times in my career as a Fox News anchor to have been embarrassed enough to know I'm going to stay on the yellow light for this. I'm not in the green light territory. I'm not in the red light territory either, but I am staying in the yellow light territory for now. I see all of the strategic advantages of what he's done. Trust me, I do. I see that other countries like Russia and China and Cuba were all over Venezuela and its oil, posing a potential threat to the United States. I get that. That's actually the most persuasive argument, and obviously the real one, and none of this bullshit about law enforcement. But I have seen what happens when you cheerlead unabashedly U.S. intervention in foreign countries, thinking it's for our good and for the international good, only to wind up with what we've called quagmire in places like Iraq, not to mention Libya. We're not great at going into these foreign countries, decapitating them at the leadership level, and then saying either we're going to steer the country to a better place or it's going to steer itself. Either one. They just, 9 times out of 10, they don't work out well. And what does it mean in terms of boots on the ground? Trump is saying, I'm actually fine with that in Venezuela. Well, whose boots? Because I have a 16-year-old boy. And I have a 12-year-old boy, and I have a 14-year-old girl. And a lot of my listeners have children, too, who are actually the ones who might have to fill the boots. So I think I speak for a lot of moms and dads, for that matter, when I say I'm staying in yellow territory until we know more. And I will not be joining the Fox News cheerleading brigade this time. I've been burned too many times. So that's why we're beginning the show with Aaron Mate.
Konstantin Kisin talking about the attacks from the woke right and the woke left on Trump's decision here. He wrote something that I found to be pretty poignant. Let me share this with you. All the bleating about international law shows just how completely deluded some of our elites have become. International law was a pleasant fiction that lasted for a few decades. It was never real, and now the world has reverted to its default setting: great power politics. This is why, as a strong Ukraine supporter, I've never talked about international law or called Putin's attack an illegal invasion. Laws are based on submission to an overarching authority backed by force. There is no such international authority, and even if you view the UN as one, it does not have, which, by the way, we shouldn't, and this is another thing that's revealing itself, by the way, the flawed, morally empty world of the UN and its international law diktats. It does have the ability to use force against those who violate international law it does not have the ability to use force against those who violate international law other than against small countries with weak militaries. When the US attacked Iraq, the UN did nothing. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the UN did nothing. If China invades Taiwan tomorrow, the UN will do nothing. If you can't enforce a law, it's not a law. I do not support Ukraine because naughty Vlad broke the rules. I support Ukraine because it's not in our interest in the West to have Russia marauding its way through friendly countries on the borders of Europe. It's in our interest for us to be as strong as possible and for our adversaries to be as weak as possible. Correct, because the Western standard of morality, even though not perfect, is morally better than that of Russia and that of China, and that's why. And that's why it's so hard for the woke right and woke left to defend this, because they don't really believe in moral absolutes in the same way that we do. Or rather, if they do, it's a very different form of morality. President Trump is a realist and a pragmatist. He sees through the fictions other leaders cling to. A good leader advances the national interest of his country. If more Western leaders did this, our civilization would be in a much better place. I think that's absolutely right. And, one thing I would finish by saying is that with this vacuum of total lack of moral leadership, with this revelation we're seeing of flawed moral paradigms and the failure of international law to uphold or to even provide moral clarity and leadership, there's a vacuum here. And this is what I believe the Jewish people were always destined to fill. This is what the Jewish people are meant to be for the world. They are really meant to be the ones that guide the world in how to behave morally, how to have morally upright societies. We've already done that in many ways, in ways that a lot of people don't even really appreciate. And we have so much more to do. And it actually reminds me that we have a documentary on our JTV Plus platform called A World Without the Jews, which goes through how the world has been dramatically impacted by the values and ideas first espoused by the Hebrew Bible, in ways in which Jew and Gentile, believer and non-believer, have all been impacted massively. Have a watch the trailer, and if you want to watch the full thing, you can just click the link below in the video description.
The most basic of all of our values, which is the value of life, is largely absent from the ancient world. That's kind of shocking. How come 6,000 years of human history is basically 6,000 years of warfare? The question we have to answer is, what is it about Judaism that enabled the Jewish people to be so impactful? We don't appreciate how much the world has been formed by these values because they have so seeped into our collective consciousness for so long.
To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.